What would you do if three young warriors, full of pride and raw ambition, confronted an elderly woman tending flowers in a restricted military zone? You'd probably think she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest stories. This is one of those times. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound at Coronado Naval Base. The air smelled of salt water mixed with freshly turned earth. An odd combination in a place designed to forge the hardest warriors on the planet, in a small patch of carefully maintained soil. Tucked between the harsh concrete of the barracks, an elderly woman worked quietly among her roses. Her silver hair caught the light like a crown, pulled back loosely at the base of her neck. The lines on her face told stories of decades lived under harsh suns, and her hands moved with the kind of purposeful grace that comes only from years of practice. She wore simple denim overalls over a faded green shirt. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. Her leather gloves were worn smooth, the kind of gloves that had seen countless hours of work. She was pulling weeds from around a rose bush, completely absorbed in her task, when the voice cut through the morning quiet. "Hey, you realize you're not supposed to be here, right?" The voice belonged to a young man whose confidence outweighed his wisdom by a considerable margin. Petty Officer Candidate Miller stood with his arms crossed, flanked by two of his fellow trainees. They'd just finished running the obstacle course, their bodies still humming with adrenaline and pain. Their muscles ached, their skin was caked with sand and sweat, and they radiated that particular energy of young men who think suffering makes them invincible. Miller's head was freshly buzzed, the pale skin of his scalp still visible beneath the stubble. His two companions stood like eager wolves waiting for a signal. They were all lean, all hard, all vibrating with barely controlled aggression, and standing in front of them, kneeling peacefully in the dirt, was this old woman who seemed completely out of place in their world of violence and discipline. The woman didn't look up immediately. She kept working, her fingers coaxing a stubborn weed from the soil with patient precision. "The roses need attention," she said quietly, her voice like the rustle of autumn leaves. "They can't wait." Miller made a harsh sound in his throat, somewhere between a laugh and a snort. "The roses? Lady, do you have any idea where you are? This is a training facility. It's secure. It's sacred. You need special permission just to breathe this air, and I'm pretty sure your gardening club membership doesn't count." His friends laughed, a grating sound that seemed too loud in the peaceful morning. They'd earned every bruise and callus on their bodies over the past weeks. They were being forged into something special, or so they believed. Seeing this calm, elderly woman in their domain felt wrong somehow, like finding a soft pillow in a room full of knives. She represented everything they were trying to leave behind: comfort, age, gentleness, weakness. The woman finally pulled the weed free, roots and all, and placed it carefully in a small bucket beside her. Only then did she turn her head to look at them. Her eyes were pale blue. Thought they'd be time, but there was something in them that cut right through Miller's bravado. They were the eyes of someone who had seen things, real things, not the manufactured challenges of military training. "This ground was made sacred by the men who trained here long before you were born," she replied, her tone even and calm. "I'm just trying to keep it beautiful for them." The word that came next landed like a match on gasoline. She called him son. Miller's jaw clenched. That word. His father had used it with disappointment. His mother had used it with pity. Hearing it from this old woman felt like she was dismissing everything he'd become, everything he was suffering to achieve. It made him feel small when he was desperately trying to feel large. "Don't call me that," he snapped, stepping closer until his shadow fell across her. "You don't know anything about this place. We bleed here. We sweat. Air. We push ourselves beyond what normal people can even imagine. And what do? You plant pretty flowers." He gestured dismissively at the vibrant blooms around her. "What gives you the right to even be here?" One of his companions, a wiry guy named Jacobs, noticed something as the woman shifted her position. Her sleeve had ridden up her forearm, revealing the edge of an old tattoo. It was faded, the ink blurred by decades of sun and time, a greenish shape that was barely recognizable. "Whoa. Check it out," Jacob said with a sneer. "Grandma's got some ink. What's that supposed to be? A good luck charm? A four-leaf clover?" The woman instinctively pulled her sleeve down. Something flickered across her face. Not shame exactly, but a desire for privacy. The gesture was all the encouragement the young men needed. Miller leaned down, bringing his face uncomfortably close to hers. "Let's see it," he demanded. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't cower. Her pale blue eyes stayed locked on his, and she simply waited. That stillness was somehow more infuriating than any shouted argument could have been. He felt his control slipping, felt the aggression they'd been cultivating in training rising to the surface like steam. "You think you're tough?" he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Being out here with us? Tell you what, every real operator has a call sign. It's a name you earn when things get dark and dangerous. I bet you've got one too, don't you? What do they call you? The Petunia Predator." Rose Bush Rambo. The laughter from his friends echoed off the concrete walls, cruel and loud. It sounded profane in this quiet space. The woman's expression barely changed, but something sad settled into her eyes. She looked past Miller, past the laughing boys, toward a granite memorial wall that stood about 100 yards away. The surface of that wall was covered in names, carved deep into the stone. "You have no idea what you're asking," she said softly, her words almost carried away by the ocean breeze. Her quiet dignity was something they couldn't understand, couldn't process. In their world of explosive effort, loud commands, and brutal certainty, her silence registered as weakness. Here, age registered as fragility. They saw a target, and they were pressing their advantage, enjoying the feeling of power over someone who seemed so utterly unable to fight back. Miller couldn't break her. He couldn't get the reaction he wanted. It made him push harder. "I asked you a question," he pressed, his voice rising with frustration. "We earn our names here, through blood and pain. What's your name? What's your call sign?" He straightened up, puffing out his chest. "Or are you just some random civilian who wandered in to play in the dirt?" The other trainees closed the circle, their presence creating a physical wall of intimidation. They were a pack, young and dangerous, and full of untested fire. They didn't see a person in front of them. They saw an obstacle to their worldview, a soft and inexplicable presence in their hard, defined world. The woman finally sighed, a long, slow breath that seemed to carry years of weight. She began to push herself up from the ground, her movements stiff. It was the first sign of age-related difficulty she'd shown, and Miller took it as surrender. "That's right," he smirked. "Time to pack up your little garden tools and go home." That's when a new voice cut through the air, like a blade. A voice that carried the weight of real command in the gravel of 1,000 battlefield orders. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Miller?" The trainees froze. They snapped their heads around to see Master Chief Petty Officer Thompson standing 20 feet away. Thompson was a living legend in the SEAL community, a man who had been operating since before these kids were born. His face looked like it had been carved from granite, and his eyes, which had seen combat in every hellhole of the modern world, were narrowed into slits of pure fury. He walked toward them with the smooth, deliberate glide of a predator. Each step was silent, despite his size. The air seemed to grow heavier with each foot he covered. The smirks vanished from the trainees' faces, replaced by the pale, wide-eyed terror usually reserved for the worst moments of Hell Week. "I asked you a question," Thompson repeated, his voice dangerously low. He stopped directly in front of Miller, who was a good 4 inches taller but seemed to shrink under the Master Chief's gaze. We were just, securing the area, Master Chief," Miller stammered. The lies sounded pathetic, even as they left his mouth. "Securing the area?" Thompson's eyes flicked to the old woman, who now stood quietly brushing dirt from her overalls. "From what?" "A civilian tending a garden that was personally approved by the base commander." He turned his laser-like focus back to Miller. "I heard you. I heard every disrespectful word. You were demanding her call sign." Thompson's lips curled into something that was far more terrifying than any shout. "You are not worthy to speak that word. You're trainees. You're tadpoles. You're nothing. You haven't earned the right to wear that uniform, let alone dream about the Trident. You think you're tough because you survived a few weeks of pain. He took another step closer, invading Miller's personal space. You want to know her call sign? Are you absolutely sure you're man enough to handle it? A profound silence fell over the small group. The ocean breeze felt suddenly cold. The sun seemed to dim. The other two trainees took involuntary steps backward, trying to distance themselves from Miller, who had become a lightning rod for the Master Chief's fury. Miller stood his ground, trapped by his own arrogance and Thompson's suffocating presence. He could only manage the slightest, most terrified nod. Thompson didn't take his eyes off Miller. He spoke to the woman without looking at her, his voice suddenly filled with a deep and profound reverence that was utterly shocking. Ma'am, I apologize for the behavior of these children. They are ignorant. They haven't learned yet. He turned his head slightly and gave her a slow, formal nod of respect. To the absolute astonishment of the trainees, the old woman simply nodded back. Some silent communication passed between them, something the young men couldn't begin to understand. Then Thompson's attention snapped back to the trainees, his voice turning to steel. He pointed at the woman's forearm, where her sleeve had ridden up again. You see this tattoo? Jacobs, you thought it was a clover? You're an idiot. That is the insignia of the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. He let the acronym hang in the air. MacVazog. The name landed like a bomb. SOG. The deadliest, most clandestine special operations unit of the Vietnam War. The men who conducted cross-border operations, who disappeared into the jungles and were never spoken of. The forerunners of everything these trainees hoped to become. Ghost stories made flesh. The trainees' mouths hung open. This couldn't be real. This woman, Thompson continued, his voice dropping too near a whisper, is Dr. Evelyn Reed. During the war, she wasn't sitting in some clean hospital in the safe zone. She was a volunteer surgeon with clandestine forward operating bases. When a reconnaissance team got shot to pieces across the border, it was her hands that put them back together. She went on rescue missions, the suicidal kind where you extract wounded operators and bodies from hot landing zones. She did it, unarmed, with nothing but a medical kit and courage that would make every single one of you wet yourselves. The trainees stared at Dr. Reed, truly seeing her for the first time. The wrinkles weren't just signs of age anymore. They were etchings of history. The quiet demeanor wasn't weakness. It was the supreme confidence of someone who had faced the absolute worst of humanity and survived. The faded green shirt suddenly seemed to take on the hue of jungle fatigues. Miller felt the blood drain from his face. The ground beneath his feet, the consecrated ground he had so arrogantly claimed as his own, suddenly felt unstable. Thompson wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, as if preparing to speak something holy. The men she saved, those grizzled, hard-as-nails operators, they gave her a name. They didn't call her Doc or Evelyn. When a team was hit, when they were surrounded and bleeding out in the jungle with the enemy closing in, the call that went out over the radio, the prayer they would send up was, "Get us the Green Lady." The words hit like a physical blow. The Green Lady. It wasn't about the garden. It was about the jungle. The Green Hell. She was the angel of mercy who appeared in that hell. Why the Green Lady? Thompson's voice was thick with emotion now. Because she was a phantom. She'd slip into landing zones under fire that pilots refused to land in, a green-clad figure moving through smoke and chaos. There's a story that old operators still tell in hushed tones over whiskey. A reconnaissance team was compromised deep in enemy territory, ambushed by a battalion-sized force. Every man was critically wounded. They were surrounded, taking fire from all sides. No way out. The forward air controller couldn't even see them through the jungle canopy. They were about to be overrun. Thompson paused, letting the image sink in. Evelyn, back at the forward operating base, heard the radio traffic. She grabbed her kit, bullied a helicopter pilot into flying her to the estimated coordinates, and rappelled 70 feet through triple canopy jungle alone. She landed in the middle of the firefight. The trainees had stopped breathing. This wasn't a story from a book. The woman who had done this was standing right in front of them, smelling of rose, soil, and sunshine. For 6 hours, Thompson continued, his gaze distant as if seeing the scene himself. She kept those men alive. She performed emergency chest surgery on one man with just a knife to relieve a collapsed lung. She used her own shirt to pack a massive artery bleed on another, all while the team fought around her, moving from tree to tree, protecting her. When the extraction helicopters finally found a hole in the canopy at dusk, she had stabilized every single one of them. Every member of that team came home alive that day. Because of her. Because of the Green Lady. Thompson turned his full attention back to Miller, his face a mask of cold, controlled rage. You stand here on ground, paid for by men like that, and you mocked their savior. You demanded her call sign. Now you have it. Choke on it. Miller's legs felt weak. He couldn't speak. The arrogance that had defined him just minutes before had been systematically dismantled and burned to ash. In its place was a cavernous, soul-crushing shame. He looked at Dr. Reed, this small, elderly woman, and saw the giant she truly was. He saw the firefight. He saw the blood. He saw the impossible courage. He wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. Just then, a black sedan pulled up nearby. A man in the crisp uniform of a Navy captain stepped out. The base commander. Thompson's call had been brief and to the point. The captain strode over, his face grim. He'd been briefed on what happened. He looked at the 3 trainees, his eyes lingering on Miller with profound disappointment, then turned to Dr. Reed. He executed a perfect, sharp salute. Dr. Reed, my sincerest apologies. There is no excuse for this. None whatsoever. Dr. Reed looked at the 3 young men. They stood with their heads bowed, unable to meet her gaze. They looked like what they were. Boys stripped of their false bravado, awaiting punishment. She could have ended their careers with a single word. They knew it. The commander knew it. Everyone knew it. She turned to the captain, her voice as calm and steady as it had been all morning. Captain, these boys made a mistake. They lack understanding, not potential. Washing them out of the program would be a waste. The commander looked surprised. Ma'am, the best lessons aren't taught in a classroom or on the training field, she said, her eyes moving back to Miller. They're learned through humility. I have a request. Anything, ma'am? Anything at all. I want them assigned to me, 1 hour, every single day, for the remainder of their time in training. She gestured to her small garden. This isn't just a flower bed. Every plant here is dedicated to a man I knew. A man who didn't come home. This rose bush, she touched a deep red bloom, is for Gary. He loved the smell of his wife's garden. The lavender is for Mike. He said it reminded him of his mother's porch back home. Her gaze swept over the trainees. Their punishment will be to work this soil. They will pull weeds and water flowers. And while they work, I will tell them the stories of the men this garden honors. I will teach them what it truly costs to earn that trident. I will teach them the meaning of the names on that wall. That'll be their punishment and their education. The captain stared at her, a look of immense respect on his face. He nodded, slowly. Your request is granted, ma'am. He turned to the shattered trainees. You heard her. You will report to Dr. Reed every day at 6 in the morning. You will give her the respect you would give your commanding officer. You will listen. You will learn, and you will thank God for the mercy she is showing you. Dismiss. The other 2 trainees practically fled, their shame propelling them away. Miller remained, frozen in place. He finally lifted his head, his eyes swimming with tears. He looked at the Green Lady. Ma'am, he croaked, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. Dr. Reed simply looked at him, her pale blue eyes holding not anger, but a profound, weary sadness and a flicker of something else. Hope. She bent down, picked up a small hand trowel, and held it out to him. Apology accepted, son, she said, her voice gentle. Now, let's get to work. I'll start by telling you about a young medic named Danny who saved my life in the valley. Miller took the trowel. Its wooden handle felt both impossibly heavy and profoundly sacred in his trembling hand. He knelt in the dirt at the feet of a legend, a boy about to learn what it really means to become a man.